I've always been the kind of person who laughed at ghost stories. Haunted houses, urban legends, just overactive imaginations and flickering lights. That was before my mom inherited an old house from her uncle in a quiet countryside town called Pine Hollow. The house was massive, built in the 1920s, and hadn't been lived in for over 30 years. The air inside smelled like wet books and old wood, and despite the windows being shut, we always felt a strange breeze on our necks. The locals warned us, but not directly. At the gas station, the cashier stared too long when we mentioned the address. An old man sitting by the window stopped chewing his sandwich mid-bite and mumbled something like,
"They never fix the floors, huh?"
I asked what he meant, but he just shook his head. The more people avoided answering questions, the more curious I got. Mom, of course, brushed it off as small-town superstition. I didn't. It started with the key. A rusty, old-fashioned skeleton key that didn't match any modern door in the house. I found it under a loose floorboard in what used to be the study. The key was tied with a faded green ribbon, and the metal was ice cold, even though it was the middle of summer. I tried using it on every locked door in the house, but nothing fit. Then, one night, I heard a clicking noise. Not the house creaking, but the sound of a key turning. The next morning, the door at the end of the hallway, one that had always been sealed shut, was slightly open. Not enough to see inside, but enough to know it was no longer locked. I asked my mom if she'd opened it, but she said it was always stuck, painted shut decades ago. I didn't open it right away. Something about the darkness behind that door felt wrong. Like if I opened it fully, something would look back at me. The weirdness escalated fast. That night, I heard footsteps above my bedroom. Thing is, there's no second floor in that section of the house, just attic space. Then the light started flickering, only in the hallway near the mystery door. I thought maybe it was electrical, until I saw a shadow move across the hall while I was holding a flashlight. There was no one else awake. I finally decided I needed to know what was behind the door, but I didn't expect what I found inside. I waited until morning before opening the door. I figured sunlight would make whatever was in there feel less threatening. But even in broad daylight, the room was unnaturally dark. The window was boarded shut from the inside, which made no sense. Who would board up a window on the inside and paint the door shut from the outside? I stepped in cautiously, phone flashlight in hand. The air was thick, like breathing in dust and memories that didn't belong to me. The room was almost empty, except for a child-sized bed frame, a broken rocking horse, and dozens of old photographs taped to the walls. Not framed. Taped. Some were scratched out, others faded from time, but all featured the same girl, about 7 years old, standing in different places around the house. Some were black and white, others in that weird, overly saturated color from the 70s. But the strangest part? In almost every photo, she was holding the same green-ribboned key I found. I brought one of the photos downstairs to show Mom, but as soon as I placed it on the kitchen table, she froze.
"That's Lily,"
she whispered. I blinked, confused. Who? She looked at me like she was trying to remember something through fog. Uncle Mike had a daughter. No one talked about her. There was some accident. I thought it was just a story. She never explained further, only said we shouldn't touch anything in that room. But I'd already crossed that line, hadn't I? That night, I couldn't sleep. Not just because of the creaks and faint knocks echoing through the walls, but because I kept dreaming of the girl, Lily. In the dream, she stood at the foot of my bed, dripping wet like she'd climbed out of a lake, clutching the key and staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. I woke up to the sound of the rocking horse creaking upstairs. It was moving. I could hear it. But I hadn't touched it since finding the room. The next morning, I found muddy footprints leading from the hallway to my bedroom door. Small ones, bare feet. I followed them back to the mystery room, but they stopped right at the threshold, as if whoever made them never actually walked inside. That's when I noticed something new in the room. On the wall, next to the old photographs, was a single fresh Polaroid, still curling from development. It was me, standing in the hallway, and behind me, Lily. I stared at the Polaroid in my hand for a long time. It was impossible. I had never seen a camera in that room, and no one else had taken the photo. The image was grainy, but Lily's face was clear. Not smiling, not angry, just watching. I showed it to my mom, but she refused to look. She told me to throw it away, that the house had too much grief in its walls. Her words stuck with me. Not fear, grief. Like something tragic had rooted itself here and never left. That evening, I locked my bedroom door. It didn't help. Around 2 a.m., I heard the soft pitter-patter of bare feet running across the hallway. They stopped right outside my room. Then came a knock. Just one. Not aggressive. Not playful. Just a single, heavy knock, like someone asking to come in, but not wanting to force it. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. And eventually, the sound faded away. But the cold stayed in the room like a warning. The next day, I went to the town archives after school. I needed answers. I searched for anything about Lily, Uncle Mike, or this house. It took hours, but eventually I found a newspaper clipping from 1983. Tragedy on Pine Hollow Road. 7-year-old drowns in family pond. The photo was small, but it was definitely her. Lily. The article said she had wandered out at night during a storm and fell into the pond behind the property. Her body wasn't found for 2 days. Mike moved out shortly after and never returned. I went to the backyard. The pond was still there, murky and surrounded by overgrown weeds. I sat by the edge for a long time, trying to imagine that night. A little girl alone in the dark, scared and lost. Was she trying to find something? Or someone? The wind shifted and I heard it again. That same creak from the rocking horse, but fainter, as if carried from the house to the pond. When I turned around, the upstairs window was open. The one in Lily's room. But I never opened it. That night, I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I talked into the dark. I said her name. Lily, if you're still here, I'm sorry. I told her that whatever she needed, closure, peace, someone to remember her, I was listening. No answer came. But as I lay in bed, I felt something shift. Not in the air, but in the atmosphere of the house. Like the walls had exhaled after holding in pain for years. And for the first time since we moved in, the night passed without a single sound. Weeks passed. The air in the house felt lighter, as if whatever held it hostage had finally loosened its grip. My mother noticed it too. Fewer cold spots, fewer things falling or moving without cause. Even the lights stopped flickering, but the silence wasn't empty. It was like the house was watching, waiting. Not in a threatening way, but like an old soul observing the people inside. The kind of presence you don't fear anymore, but you never quite forget is there. One afternoon, I went up to the attic to look through the last of Mike's boxes. Most were filled with books and tools, but one stood out. It was smaller, wrapped in an old quilt. Inside was a collection of Lily's drawings. Childish but detailed. There was one of the pond, one of the attic, and one of a girl in bed, watching the door. In the corner of that drawing, Lily had written in crooked letters,
She sees me now.
My stomach dropped. These weren't just memories. She was trying to communicate something. That night, I took the drawing to my room and placed it on the nightstand. Around midnight, I felt the air shift again. Not cold this time, but warm, like someone had opened a window in spring. I sat up and saw a figure at the end of the bed. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a threat. It was a girl with long, wet hair, in an old nightgown, just standing, not moving, just existing. She didn't speak, but I felt everything in that moment. Sadness, loneliness, a longing to be understood. Then slowly, she turned and walked into the hallway. When I followed, the hallway was empty. The next morning, I went to the backyard one last time. I brought flowers, white lilies, and placed them by the edge of the pond. I said goodbye. Not in fear, not in pain, but in peace.
You're not alone anymore.
I whispered. And maybe she heard me. Maybe she moved on. Or maybe she stayed, just quieter now. just watching over the place she once called home. Either way, the house has never felt the same. And I don't think it ever will. Years later, when I drive past Pine Hollow Road, I always slow down near the old house. Someone else lives there now. Kids play in the yard and the lights glow warmly from the windows. But every time I glance up at the attic window, part of me still expects to see Lily. Not trapped, not haunting, just present. Because some stories don't end in screams. Some end in silence. And a quiet understanding between two souls who once felt invisible.